Welcome everyone. My name is Colson France and I'm the Senate Vice Chair for ASGCU. We have some important business to discuss, so let's get started. It's 11:12 and I officially call this meeting to order.
Ladies and gentlemen, you could have been anywhere in the world tonight, but you're here with us in the GCU classroom. Are you ready for a Senate meeting? The issue on tape. Stall talking out to ensure all fellow locals know the exciting events are coming up this October. Senator Thompson, you have the floor. October 19th, it's gonna be so lit. And if you wanna know why you best listen, I'ma spit. Gain wisdom and knowledge are the recipe question forum. Learn how to treat people with respect and decorum. But do not forget, the Analysts on Us campaign is coming up next. Running from October 16th through the 20th. Join us, take the pledge, I can promise no regrets. Oh, if you got blood, then give it. If you have some to spare, people need it every minute. The 11th and 12th of the dates. Let's come together now so we can change people's fates. In your calendars, don't worry, mark them down. Let's think it's this month and you'll be leaving like, wow. Another thing I just remembered offhand, and it's the Halloween Spectacular that's hosted in the Macabre. The Grove Lawn will be the place to be on October 28th. Get rid of the trick or treat. Now all of these events can kind of make you dizzy, but as your student leaders, we want to serve and keep you busy.
Yes, Senator Thompson?
Can I use the restroom? Keeping you in the know when you gotta go.
With us this morning. God, we give everything to you. Have your way in us this week, Lord. We're listening for your voice. We want your way, God. Not ours, your way, Lord. We love you and we praise you in this place, God. Take this life and breathe on. Oh, this heart that is mine. You can have it all, Lord. Every part of my world. Take this life and breathe on this heart that is now yours. Oh, it's yours. And all to Jesus I surrender. All to Him I freely give. And I will ever love and trust Him in His presence daily live. I surrender all. I surrender all. And all to Thee, my blessed Savior, I surrender all. God, we thank you that you allow us to surrender everything to you, God. We thank you that you carry our burdens, God. We ask that you lead us this morning, that you lead us this week into your love and into your peace and into your joy. Savior, I come, quiet my soul. Remember redemption's hill where your blood was spilled for my ransom. And everything I once held dear, I count it all as lost. Lead me to the cross where your love poured out, and bring me to my knees. Lord, I lay me down and rid me of myself. I belong to you. Oh, lead me to the cross. You were as I, tempted and tried. You the Word became flesh, bore my sin and death. Now you're risen, and everything I once held dear, I count it all as lost. Lead me to the cross where your love poured out, and bring me to my knees. Lord, I lay me down and rid me of myself. I belong to you. Oh, lead me to the cross. To your heart. To your heart. Lead me to your heart. Lead me to your heart. Lead me to the cross where your
walking around these walls. Oh, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, and knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Oh, your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. Oh, one sing, I know the night won't last. I know the night won't last, 'cause your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Oh, 'cause Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Oh, 'cause your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. Faithfulness, I know. Still in your hands. Oh, this is my confidence. You never fail me. Your promise still stands. Come on. Great is your faithfulness. Faithfulness, I know. Still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. Oh my God, he does not fail. Oh, I know that he never will. No, he never will. So faith arise, faith is rising in what you've said. I've seen it move. I've seen you move. You move the mountains, and I believe. Come on. I see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way. I believe. I see you do it again. I've seen you move. You move the mountains, and I believe. Yeah, I see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe. I see you do it again. I see you move. You move the mountains, and I believe. I see you do it again. You made a way when there was no way, and I believe. I see you do it again. Oh, I will. Oh, I see you do it again. 'Cause faith is rising. Faith is rising on your word. Yeah. Sing your promise. 'Cause your promise still stands. Great is your faith. Yeah, come on. Faithfulness, sing it out. I'm still in your hands. Oh, this is my confidence. No, you never failed me. Promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness. I know. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never failed me yet. So I never will forget that He's never failed me yet. Faith is rising today. That He was faithful then, and He's faithful now, and He always will be. 'Cause I've seen Him move. He's moved the mountains, and I believe. Come on. Oh, I see it. 'Cause you made a way where there was. So I believe. Oh, I see you do it again. You move the mountains, and I believe, I believe. You made a way, declare it. So I believe, I see you do it again. Oh, we believe, we believe. Let's pray together. God, would you raise up faith in us today? Lord, would today be such a turning moment where we say these areas of our lives, these areas and environments that we're in that we haven't seen the Lord move, God, would we just turn to you in every area? Would today be a moment where we say, I believe God is powerful, I believe God is faithful, and so I invite Him into my life. God, would we see you move on this campus? Would we see you move in this nation, God, in this world? We believe that you're good. We live in a world that needs your goodness. So would faith rise up in us today that we would say, my God has never failed and He never will. God, we thank you just for your unfailing love. And we pray all of these things in your name. Amen. Amen. Amen.
So happy Monday. Welcome to chapel. So if you haven't figured this out yet, we have about 35 students or so that participate in our worship ministry. So the band kind of rotates every 3 weeks. You need to let them know how much you appreciate them leading us on Mondays. Yeah. So they have midterms and studying just like the rest of you do, but they make it a part of their life to serve us in this way. So I really appreciate what they do. Yeah, that's right. So a couple things to follow up on last week. There is a blood drive on the 11th and the 12th, which would be Wednesday and Thursday of this week. It'll be between Canyon and Cypress Hall. And so if you would like to donate blood to go to Las Vegas to help with the injured there, that would be greatly appreciated. It'll start at 7 in the morning, and it'll go to 8 in the morning till 7 p.m. all day those 2 days. So we would really love for you to participate in that blood drive. Today, after the service, after the chapel service, right here in the arena, is going to be a bioethics conference, and you are invited as students. It's free of charge to you. If you have some time off this afternoon, right after the lunch hour, starting at 1:30 here in the arena, you are more than welcome to participate in that first of its kind here bioethics conference. We got a great speaker lined up for this morning, and as well next year, and so we'll tell you more about that as we get closer. Next week, we have Greg Boyle. Greg Boyle is an amazing leader, an amazing pastor, man of God, who's going to be speaking to us. He leads Homeboy Industries, and has an incredible impact in LA with those who are offenders and trying to go through re-entry into the system, into general society. So I think you will really enjoy hearing from Pastor Boyle next week. So Friday, we have 2 soccer games, men's and women's both. They would love for you to come out and cheer them on. On Saturday, women's softball is going to be playing against Mesa Community College, kind of a little tune-up for the rest of the year, and they would appreciate you coming out to cheer them on as they kind of launch their season as well. And then this is kind of fun. Our bowling team is going to be competing against against ASU at Friday at 5 p.m. in the bowling alley. So you need to show up in purple and kind of let them know who's, all right, I'll just leave it at that. All right, so that's on Friday. Our speaker today is from Stand to Reason. His name is Alan Schleman. He speaks all over the country. Would you give him a warm welcome today as he comes to the platform?
Thank you. Well, I know it's customary for a guest speaker to begin by, sharing a story about their own personal life, or maybe telling a joke, that's funny that gets the audience to laugh, because you're supposed to try to figure out a way to connect with the audience before you start diving into some deep topic. But frankly, because I only have 20 minutes, let's just do this. Let's just kind of skip that part. Let's just, on the count of 3, laugh and pretend that I said something funny, okay? So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. All right. Yeah, fantastic, right? See, now we know each other, right? We're friends, right? Fantastic. Well, Joseph Merrick was a man who was born in England. He only lived to the age of 27. And the reason is because Joseph Merrick was born with a severe congenital condition that caused incredible deformities all over his body. In fact, as he got older, he started to develop massive growths in his head. His head had half of it was just completely misshapen and had massive growths on it. His arms had all kinds of growth on it as well. You couldn't even see and distinguish his fingers because there was so much deformity in his arm. If you looked at his back, there was all kinds of growth on his back. It looked like large pieces of cauliflower were growing on his back. And then his legs as well had massive deformities on them. He had to hobble when he walked. In fact, he was so disfigured that he went to work in a freak show in London. In fact, he was called the Elephant Man. Many of you probably have heard of the movie The Elephant Man. It was back in 1980 when it was made, and it stars Anthony Hopkins. And there's a really amazing scene in that movie where Joseph Merrick has just gotten off a train, and he's walking through a train station. Now, he's wearing a bunch of loose clothing to kind of cover up his body. He has a hood on with some holes so he could see with his eyes. He's got a cap on as well. So for the most part, you couldn't see any part of his body. Joseph Merrick is walking through this train station, and a young boy sees this man and says, "Why is this man dressed like this? I'm going to go make fun of him." So this boy starts to come up and pester Joseph Merrick. He says, "Hey, mister, why are you wearing that?" He starts to shoot spit wads at him, and Joseph Merrick gets a little uncomfortable, so he starts to pick up the pace because he doesn't want to be seen by anybody. He doesn't want to draw attention to himself. The boy continues to pester him, and Joseph Merrick picks up the pace, and then finally he accidentally bumps into a little girl who falls over, and as she falls over, she screams. And of course, this catches the attention of people all over the train station. And so people start to wonder, why is this girl knocked over? Why is this man who's completely covered running away from her? And so people start to chase him and start to come after him, and he starts to pick up the pace even further. Eventually, the crowd gets so large that they completely circle him, and he can't go anywhere. And somebody grabs the hood and pulls it off his head. And they see this thing, this head, this person with this massive deformity, and they're just stunned. They don't know what to say. Joseph Merrick realizes an opportunity here, so he just starts to take off again. And pretty soon the crowd starts to chase him again, and they're just getting more and more rowdy, more and more rambunctious. Eventually, Joseph Merrick goes down some stairs, enters into this room. He thinks he could be safe, but they follow him in the room, and he realizes it's a bathroom. He's completely cornered. He's completely blocked off from escaping. The crowd comes to press up against him into the back wall of this bathroom. And just before they take their hands and put it on him, Joseph Merrick shouts. He says, "I am not an animal." I am a human being. I am a man. And he begins to whimper as he kind of slides in the back of this bathroom. The crowd eventually begins to dissipate, and they start to leave him alone, just wondering, what is going on here? Well, what does it mean to be a human being? Is it that we have to look human? Is that what makes us a human being? I think the answer is no, right? Joseph Merrick didn't look human. Does it mean we have to function like a human? Is that what it means? Well, of course, Joseph Merrick couldn't function like a human in many ways. I think we all probably know deep down inside there's something more to it. There's got to be something deeper. I want you to consider how the following real-life examples that have happened in our society are in a subtle yet profound way answering this question. Many years ago, Ron Reagan, who is the son of President Ronald Reagan, argued on national television that we should fund the cloning of human beings, and these clones of us should reside at the hospital to function like our own personal biological repair kit. And that way, when we get sick, when we get ill, when our body parts start to fail, we can go to that personal biological repair kit, take parts from the clone, and use them for our own health and well-being. Another example is of a woman named Terry. She was 41 years old. She suffered a cardiac arrest and as a result had brain damage, very severe. In fact, she required 24-hour care. Many people at the hospital had to take care of her, feed her and all that. And of course, her husband had to do it for a time as well, but eventually he didn't want anything of it. So her husband ordered and authorized the hospital by a court order to refuse to give her any more food or any more drinks. And after 13 days without eating a single thing and without drinking a single thing, Terry suffered from extreme dehydration and died. One final example is of a labor and delivery nurse. Her name was Jennifer. She was working at a hospital in Los Angeles. And she walked into this particular room where there was a bunch of other staff there. And as she looked around the room, she noticed on the counter was what looked like a model of a preemie baby. But something looked a little bit strange about this model. And as she walked closer, she began to realize this is not some sort of plastic model of a preemie baby. It was an actual real preemie baby. And as she got even closer, she began to realize it's moving. And she went to pick up this baby, and as she did that, she realized this baby's alive. And just then, as the other staff began to realize what this nurse was doing, they grabbed this preemie baby out of her hands, and Jennifer's like, what's going on? What is this baby doing here? They said, Jennifer, leave it alone. Said, but this baby's alive. They said, it's alive because you're holding it. You're keeping it warm. You're giving it life. She said, what's going on? It's a preemie baby. It's only 19 weeks old. We don't do anything for 19-week preemies. They have to be 20 weeks old. And just as she said that, that lady took a specimen container filled with formaldehyde, took the baby, threw it in, snapped the lid shut. It was over in an instant. In just 7 more days, that baby would have qualified as a human being. But at 19 weeks, he was just trash. You see, these real-life examples all address the same question. What does it mean to be human? And every single one of them is answering it in exactly the same way. It means absolutely nothing. We are witnessing a dramatic shift in thinking in our society. It is a shift in the way we see human beings. It is the death of humanness. We are witnessing the death of the idea that human beings are special in some significant way and that they are valuable and that we should care for them. And it's happening because our society has bought into a different idea of how to value human beings. In fact, there are 2 ways that human beings can be valuable. One is called intrinsic value, and the other is called instrumental value. Now, the Christian worldview says that human beings have intrinsic value. Something has intrinsic value if it is valuable in itself, meaning its value is inherent in its own existence. For example, truth, love, mercy, friendship. These are all things that we would say have intrinsic value. They are valuable in and of themselves. Now, human beings have value, have intrinsic value for one reason, and that is they are made in the image of God. In fact, Genesis 1:27 teaches this. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So this verse tells us at least 2 things. Number one is this. Our value is not based on what we can do or on who we can become, but rather on who we are now, and that is an image bearer of God. And notice, being made in God's image is not a degreed property. You don't have more of the image of God or less of the image of God. You either have the image of God or you don't. So there's no degree to which that is a part of who you are. And the second thing that verse tells us is that if our value comes from being made in the image of God, then there is nothing we can do to lose that value if perhaps, for example, we lost our limbs, we lost our physical abilities, we lose our mental abilities, we don't lose our value if we become disabled, we don't lose our value if we are regarded as by the rest of society or even by ourselves as being less than valuable. Nothing can change our value because it's not dependent upon any function, any ability, or by any external factors. In fact, this concept of intrinsic value, which is for the most part laid out in the first few chapters of Genesis, has been the foundation for Western civilization for the last 2,000 years. Our own legal system in the United States is based on an intrinsic value system. For example, the Declaration of Independence makes it clear that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. So notice, every human being has intrinsic value, and notice also every human being has equal value. Well, think about it for a moment. Why is it that we believe every human being has equal value? There's nothing that we all share equally. I could walk around this entire arena and meet every single one of you, and there isn't a single characteristic that every person in this arena shares equally. Some of you are taller, some of you are shorter. Some of you are faster, some of you are slower. Some of you are better at math, some of you are worse at math. There isn't a single characteristic that every single person in the world shares equally, so there's no basis for equality except for the fact that every single person in this room and in the world is made in the image of God. And that's what grounds our sense of equality. That's the one thing that we all share equally. We all are equally made in God's image. In fact, how is it that Martin Luther King Jr. could make his case for the civil rights of African Americans? Well, he was a pastor, a Baptist pastor, and he believed in the image of God, and that's what grounded his case for the civil rights of all people, including African Americans, because that's the one thing that all people share equally. Now, this view of intrinsic value is precisely, though, what our culture is abandoning. And if human beings don't have intrinsic value, then they have what's called instrumental value. Now, something has instrumental value if it's a means to another end. In other words, it's not valuable in and of itself. It's only valuable because it can get you something else that has value. So let me give you an example. Every 4th of July, my children, I have a 10 and a 12-year-old, my kids are always like, hey, Dad, buy us some fireworks. We want to have a great 4th of July. Now, I live in San Diego County, which, if you know, in San Diego County, every firework is illegal. And I'm not just talking about the good stuff like Roman candles and, fountains, but even stupid sparklers are illegal, okay? It's ridiculous. So being the hardened criminal that I am, I will cross a few county lines in order to procure a sparkler. Let's just say I go and get a sparkler and I buy it for $1. So I've bought this sparkler for $1. Let me ask you a question. How much is that sparkler worth? Well, it's worth $1. That's why I paid $1 for it. Why is it worth $1? It's worth $1 because it can get me something else that has value, like entertainment, happiness, maybe 2 minutes where my kids aren't fighting, which, by the way, is worth more than $1, right? But the sparkler is only valuable because it can get me something else that has value. So I let the sparkler, it sparkles for a few seconds, and then it's completely out, and now it's just a metal stick. So let me ask you now, how much is that sparkler worth? 0. Why? Because it lost its ability to get me something else that has value. It lost its ability to get me entertainment and fun and happiness. And when something only has instrumental value and that thing loses that thing, what gives it its instrumental value, then that thing loses all of its value, and then it can be thrown away. Most things, by the way, that we own, that we buy, that we have instrumental value. They are simply a means to an end. Like cars. Cars are instrumentally valuable because, well, they can take us places. Phones allow us to communicate with other people. Computers allow us to cyberstalk our friends on Facebook, right? Whole bunch of great benefits for these things. The problem is, though, is that this is increasingly how our culture views human beings, as simply being instrumentally valuable, a means to another end. And so humans are only valuable because they can do something else that has value. They can work, they can create art, they can raise children, right? They can work at a job or contribute to society. But the moment these humans start to lose these abilities is the precise moment that the humans begin to lose their value. And then we can throw them away. And in a culture that treats human beings with instrumental value, the strong will prevail and the weak will become discarded. In fact, I know this because I worked as a physical therapist in an inpatient hospital setting for over a decade before I was in this line of work. And mostly I worked with people who had incredible disabilities: cerebral palsy, paraplegia, quadriplegia, stroke, Down syndrome, you name it. And sometimes I was asked by these people to help them to commit suicide. In fact, I was working at a time when Jack Kevorkian was alive and providing people with the ability to kill themselves. And some people said, hey, can you get me in touch with Jack Kevorkian? Why do some disabled people even ask this question of whether they can commit suicide? Because our culture has been taught to ask a very dangerous question. And that is, what is their quality of life? What is their quality of life? You see, this question is based on an instrumental value system. Because notice, quality of life is a degreed property. You can have more quality of life or less quality of life. It's not like being made in the image of God where you either have it or you don't. And so what people do is they set up a threshold in their mind. And as their abilities begin to decline and as their quality of life begins to decrease, then eventually their quality of life drops below this threshold, and then they deem that themselves are no longer valuable and their life is not worth living, and they too can be thrown away. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying quality of life is never a factor to consider. It is, but it should never determine the value of a person. Human beings, no matter their disability, are beautiful people made in the image of God, the pinnacle of God's creation. But this shift from intrinsic value to instrumental value is bad news for the weak and for the vulnerable. In fact, we have plenty of examples from the past throughout all world history where we see people being treated like a means to an end. Consider even in our own country, the slavery of African Americans. Right? They were abducted from their land, brought to America, and owned as slaves. And they were not valued because they are merely a human being. Rather, they are valued only because they could provide their slave owners some other valuable end, and that is forced labor, free labor. The rise of the Nazi Party is another example. Right? The Nazis, the Third Reich, had a phrase in German, lebenswertes Leben, which meant life unworthy of life. You see, the Nazis believed that there were some human beings that didn't deserve to live. And of course, a lot of them, they believed were the Jewish nation. And that's why they killed millions of Jews. But guess what? They also killed over 200,000 disabled people. Why? Because they were only instrumentally valuable. And as their abilities began to diminish and decrease, they dropped below a certain threshold. And the Nazis believed they are no longer valuable, and they too could be thrown away. These are just a few examples of the death of humanists from the past, but this shift from intrinsic value to instrumental value is also bad news for those who are disabled, especially as we see rapid advancements in medicine and biotechnology today. For example, there's a guy named Peter Singer who's a bioethicist. Peter Singer not only says that abortion is morally permissible, that he thinks also that it should be permissible to kill disabled newborn infants for up to 4 weeks after they're born. Based on what? Based on happiness. Listen to what he says. When the death of a disabled infant will lead to the birth of another infant with better prospects of a happy life, the total amount of happiness will be greater if the disabled infant is killed. The loss of a happy life for the first infant is outweighed by the gain of a happier life for the second. Therefore, if killing the hemophiliac infant has no adverse effect on others, it would be, according to the total view, be right to kill him. Now, Peter Singer is not some no-name professor working in the basement of some sort of obscure university. He's a world-renowned bioethicist working at Princeton University. He's the founder of the animal rights movement. This guy is a major player. And notice his reasoning is based on an instrumental value system. Happiness, right? He's an outspoken atheist, so of course he doesn't believe in God, and therefore he doesn't believe in the image of God, and therefore there is no basis to ground human value, human rights, or human equality. Value is based on something else, and that is happiness, a decreed property. And this isn't just something happening just in the academic world. People are putting his philosophy into practice. And again, people with disabilities are the ones who will be at risk. In fact, many of you probably heard of a recent story about the country of Iceland. CBS wrote a recent article about how Iceland is, quote, a country where Down syndrome is disappearing. Did you catch that? It's a country where Down syndrome is disappearing. That's code for we're killing every unborn human being who's diagnosed with Down syndrome through abortion, okay? They're basically exterminating people. They're not getting rid of the disease in any way. And the reason why they say they're doing this is to prevent suffering for the child and prevent suffering for the family. Of course, never mind the fact that people with Down syndrome, as probably any of you know, if you've met someone with Down syndrome, these people aren't suffering. But the bigger problem is that they think that children with Down syndrome need to be exterminated before they're even born, because they're applying an instrumental value system to them. And when that happens, these people's abilities decline below the threshold, and they too can be thrown away. And by the way, it's not just disabled unborn infants that are at risk. Even born disabled people are at risk. There's a university in the Netherlands, the University Medical Center in Groningen. This university actually euthanizes dozens of newborn infants every single year. They call it the Groningen Protocol. And it's basically a system to determine which lives are worth living. Remember the Nazi slogan, Lebens in wertes Leben? That's exactly what they're doing. And in fact, they're not even hiding this fact. It's not like this is some secret thing they're doing. The medical director there is proudly defending this practice on national television. His name's Edward Verhegen. He says this, you are trained to save the life of a child, but with these children, the suffering can only be stopped by ending their lives. It takes courage to do that, he says. Courage. Courage? I'm sorry, but killing a disabled newborn infant is not courageous. This is cowardice. All right? Courage is standing up to fight to save the life of a child who's disabled or trying to do something to improve their life. Look, we are entering an age where the advancements of technology, science, biomedicine are advancing at a very, very rapid rate. And generally speaking, I think we should welcome these advancements, right? We want these advancements to help humanity, to solve problems, to treat disease and disability. But with any new technology, you have to realize there will be opportunities for human beings to be exploited, especially the most vulnerable members of our community. So let me close by challenging you with this. Many of you here are going to graduate and go on to work in fields like science, medicine, biotechnology, and other related things like that. For those of you, though, who are not professing to be Christians, let me ask you this. Do you believe all human beings are equally valuable? Do you believe all races are equally valuable? Do you believe it's wrong to discriminate against people? Do you believe it's wrong to exploit disabled people? Well, I actually think that you intuitively know those are all true. But guess what? It is the Christian worldview that makes the most sense of those ideas. Because it's the Christian worldview that says all human beings, regardless of their abilities, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their race, it doesn't matter. They are all equally made in God's image, and therefore they are of equal value. And it's this idea that prevents discrimination and exploitation. And so this is why I want you to consider the Christian worldview. I want you to do your due diligence, because it's the Christian worldview that makes the sense out of reality. It makes sense of this idea that all human beings are equal. And for those of you who are Christians, who do profess to be followers of Jesus, let me remind you, you are the ones who are going to be responsible for upholding an intrinsic value system in your lives and in your careers. And I know some people think, man, you can't do that as a Christian. You can't uphold a Christian ethic of being made in God's image and see advancements in science. But this is not true. For hundreds of years, we've had scientists that are Christians who had advanced scientific medicine and other things without exploiting human beings and upholding a Christian ethic. But this is not just about science, it's about people. And so you believers who go out and work in these fields, it'll be you who will have to remind people who might be despairing of life because of a disability that they are valuable and that they are beautiful. It'll be you who will be responsible for preventing the death of humanists. Let me close in prayer. Father, I thank you that you have made us, you've made us valuable, you've made us in your image, and because of that, we are incredibly significant to you. We are all of equal value, and we are beautiful because we are made in your likeness. Help us, Lord, to never forget that and to never in our word or in our deed ever demean or diminish the value and significance of every human being on this planet. And may we, as we go out and live our lives, always do what we can to stand up for those who are vulnerable, who are defenseless, so that we can make you proud that we are your children. Thank you for that. Give us the courage and the wisdom to do that in a way that brings honor to your name. Amen. You are all dismissed. Thank you very much. See you guys for lunch.
With my